He's wearing a combination.
Look, it's the Prophecy Brothers. Starring Brother Man and Brother Champion. They are brothers. They are unorthodox. Tonight's guest, Mark Sutherland, explains Brexit.
Good evening. I'm Brother Man. This is Brother Champion. We are the Prophecy Brothers.
Welcome.
Thank you for watching us this evening.
That's right, man. And joining us tonight is Mark Sutherland from out of town.
He's from way out of town. He's from London, England.
And he's been on the show before. He's a powerful movie producer of Lambs and Lions. And here he is. Mark Sutherland. Welcome, Mark.
Good evening, Brother Man. Good evening, Brother Champion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, for joining us. It is December 1st right now, and we just, if our audience doesn't know that already, I think we have a 5-hour time difference. So
Absolutely.
We're working out a little bit better. It's not early morning like it was the last time when we spoke. So
Right.
Yes. I'm awake this time, guys. I'm awake.
Well, great.
All right.
Well, for our audience, Mark contacted me and he said, "Hey, let's do a show again." And you know, with some guests and some people, you just don't say, "Well, you know, what about it? Let me think about it." Mark Sutherland contacted us, says, "Let's do a show." I'm like, "All right, let's do it and let's schedule it." So
That's right.
But I did ask him before we got on. I said, "Okay, what are we going to talk about?" Though I didn't want to know that a little bit. So Mark's going to talk to us about Brexit. And Mark, what I was kind of thinking for our audience, you know, it's in the news a lot, and especially it was a couple years ago. But I'm sure that there's some people out there that have heard of it, but maybe they're not up on it. So could you start and explain to us again, just refresh us that know about it and have heard about it before, and maybe people haven't heard about it, what Brexit is?
I would be honoured and delighted to. So in 1973, the UK was taken in to what was then called the Common Market without asking the people. There was no vote to enter the Common Market. So the European Union was a construct created in 1923 by two people, Jean Monnet and Arthur Salter, where you create the United States of Europe, and you would take away individually the democracy of each individual country, treaty by treaty, without telling them. So that's the immediate background. We were then taken into in 1973 by the then Prime Minister Ted Heath. There had been a build up to that, and maybe later on in the program we might touch on all those issues. So we were taken into a construct of a common market where we would be able to trade with 6 countries as it was then, with low tariff barriers. That's how it was pitched, being able to trade. You understand tariff barriers because before you had an inland revenue system when the Federal Reserve Bank was created. Before that, you didn't have individual taxation, but you created wealth. Of course, through philanthropy, through hard work, setting up businesses, but you would make money by crossing a good from one state to another. So if you imagine then that, for argument's sake, the UK fits into Texas just under 3.5 times, something like that, you know, your continent is massive. So in other words, each of individual countries, of course, becomes a state, which is the parallel for Europe and the United States, and then being able to trade. So coming into Brexit from 1973, so from well before then, building up from 1961 was when they wanted to take us in. There had been a huge objection to that, knowing that what kind of construct it is, which is a socialist construct, which has 26, 23 unelected commissioners, all these bureaucrats, etc., that are put in that you do not vote for. So we were taken in. Brexit was in the June the 29th, 2016, was the culmination of a massive push for a number of years. And groups then eventually got together from the Bruce Group, from the UKIP, the UK Independence Party had then morphed to that particular body led by Nigel Farage. There'd been a long road of people objecting to being within the EU. So as I say, we then forced a hand. We forced, David Cameron's hand was forced as he won the election outright with a big majority that actually shocked him in 2015. Previously, it had hung Parliament, so he could have kicked that can down the road. So what is Brexit? Brexit was our vote of 17,410,752 people, with a majority of over 1 million, to leave what it had become, which is the European Union. It had gone from a group of states trading to become the political and monetary union that it was always set up to be since 1923. It's an absolute lie when people say that that is not what it was designed for to ever do. It was designed for that. That's what Sauter and Monet had. So the reason why Brexit is absolutely crucial is that when we joined in 1973, we lost control of our borders, our laws, our total liberty. We lost our independence as a nation. So to give you an idea, you as a nation, all the states come together, but you as a nation go to the World Trade Authority to negotiate trade deals. Okay, this is a big thing that's going on. President Trump constantly talks about that, and good for him. So we'll get round to the replacement of the big trade deal in regard to Mexico and Canada and all the rest, and whether that's good, that's another issue. But it's that kind of trade deal. So we then voted out. But you individually can go to the World Trade Authority. We, as a member of the European Union, one person goes along to represent all the 26 countries. So by us voting to leave, we are hoping, and I'm saying hoping because you're aware of the fight that's going on, and we can lead into that discussion. We then voted to have the independence of our country back. We lost the sovereignty in 1973, and in the Brexit whole debate, brother man, it was never, ever explained that we lost our sovereignty. So quickly going back in history, Margaret Thatcher, who was in 1975, she then became leader of the Conservative Party. But before that, in 73, she was someone who very much backed joining the common market, and backed the then Prime Minister Ted Heath, etc. She became Prime Minister in 1979, and by 1988, she made a very famous speech called No, 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 Mr. Delors. And that was when the Europhiles within her own party plotted against her, and also within Europe, to get rid of her. She then described the European Union in her autobiography, I think, of 2003, that it will be seen as one of the greatest follies, or a big folly. I've forgotten the quote. But she began to sit in the meetings and realize what it was, even though she signed some of those particular deals. So it's about sovereignty. We lost our sovereignty in 1973. We voted on the 29th of June 2016 to get our sovereignty back, to be able to run our country again. So that may be a long-winded answer, but I was just trying to give brother champion a bit of history there, because it's the whole thing of what the big fight, it leads into that fight between nationalism and globalism, and we voted to get control of our country back.
And it's like you said, it is more than just trade. It was sold originally to your country back in 73 that this would be for trade deals, but you've lost sovereignty, borders. And can you What other things, say, in your day-to-day operations or what you can do in your country that the European Union dictates? Like you say, the migrants, the borders, what else is there?
It's very, very interesting because, and I mean, I'd like to, this gives an illustration of what is going on. So in 1973, when we actually joined, we gave up, Ted Heath sacrificed the fishing industry in this country. He gave up the fishing rights, and the fishing rights go all the way up to the beaches of this country. And that was never explained to the British people. So that people within the UK. So that meant that, all trawlers from the other European countries could come into our waters. And then it was all about quotas and this kind of thing. So we had lost access to a particular food supply, but it was never explained. So I think the big thing is, brother man, is that things have not been explained. Things have been hidden. There had been, under the Barcelona Agreement in 1995, and I think before that, and I've forgotten the word, before that, there was this agreement in regard to migration from North African countries and in the future Middle Eastern countries. And the Barcelona Agreement, people can Google that and they can look at who was there. So it's the fact that you've got that, the fact that we have given 532 billion pounds since 1973 to Europe. So when you talk about laws, it's the fact that Parliament, we have been scooped out from the inside. It's the biggest challenge that you have got over across the pond at the moment in regard to the United States of America. That being scooped out from the inside, we have found that, which means that the European legal system is what, and the courts of justice there is what we have to then kowtow to. In other words, from 1973 to 1992, you could argue there was a bit of a lull, and then in 1992, all this paperwork started to come down the line. I think one of the biggest things is that the European Union believes in corporatocracy. It's about massive corporations. It's one of the biggest challenges that you are having at the moment. You can see that in the way that companies within social media, etc., are completely taking over and completely wanting to steer the narrative. So we are seeing, I believe, an attack on it's always been about undermining entrepreneurialism to me and undermining the small person and all this kind of thing. So it's about then turning around and going, right, well, this country would be good for this. It has an overview of all the different countries and moving factories and stuff like, employment and stuff like this around. And I think, Steve, the biggest challenge is the fact that the migration then brings lower wages. And that is what companies want. And then, in regard to restriction on contracted hours and all this kind of thing. So in one way, it's quite complex. In other ways, it isn't. But I think one of the biggest issues is the lies, is not explaining to us that actually we lost sovereignty in 1973 and we do not then have control of our borders. But the other thing that's just come out, before the referendum, as we were leading up to this, they were all going, oh, there is going to be no call for a European army. No. There's no call for a European army. Well, what have they been calling for over the last few months? A European army. There's a rundown of our own forces and all this kind of thing. And then people go, oh, no, we can't. That can't be right. That can't be right. That can't be right. And there's this huge cognitive dissonance, and there's this huge, they don't want to have their paradigm attacked. And when we're seeing it, you want to create a European army. Merkel said that, to stand against, China, Russia, and America. And I quote, the concerns there. I mean, I just couldn't believe it. But there we go. But I can't believe a load of rubbish frankly, that comes out of that woman's mouth. So over to you. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. And you may have said this early on, but when it was sold to the British people, this was sold as a voluntary union that you could leave at any time. Was that how it was sold to the people?
Very, very interesting, because in 1975, there was then a referendum about coming in or out, to actually leave. And Ted Heath, he denied that we'd lost our sovereignty in 1973. Said, no, of course not. Of course not. I can't do a very good impersonation of him. He was some lefty socialist progressive toff, basically. And that's the other key thing, is defining what conservatism is. And he is very much what Theresa May is now, very much so. So no, it wasn't defined. Like, there was a referendum in 1975 to come in or out. And then they didn't have what we have now, which is the internet. They didn't have the access to certain information. Certain people did, of course they did. But if you take the fact that you might have had a restriction in regard to television channels, I'm not sure what you had in 1973. I think things were beginning to explode. But we would have had, BBC One, BBC Two, ITV, and that was it, and certain radio. In other words, it was quite easy to restrict the flow of information, right? And also we were. I mean, there's a key thing I want to talk about in regard to this, which is a bit of a revelation that happened to me this week, which is in regard to decimalization, and let's talk about that maybe shortly. So no, it was sold like that. That's why there was a huge pressure group. People always knew what it was. I mean, Hugh Gaitskell in 1961, the then leader of the Labour Party, I believe, turned around and said, if we join the EU, it would be the end of 1,000 years of history, Magna Carta and all that. We do have a constitution, I think 1689, that was brought about. It's what your constitution, one of the things it's based on, your Bill of Rights and all the rest is actually based on. No one had any right to give away the sovereignty of this nation. No one gave that. And the way it was pitched was to be, it's trading. It came out over the fact that in 1955, 56, 1955, I think it was Suez, we had gone into Suez to to take back control of the Suez Canal. Eisenhower got a little bit upset and said, I'm not very happy about that, because you didn't explain to us that you were going in there. So he then went against us. We went in to back, I think, the Israelis, the French and the Israelis. And then Eisenhower, basically, we all pulled out. We had massive amount of egg all over our face. And that is when we, as a nation, we had lost our nerve. We lost our nerve because we had, bluntly, in my own opinion, from understanding scripture and from a Christian Bible point of view, is that in 1948, we lost our empire. And we'd lost our empire because in the Balfour Agreement in 1917, 1918, we had gone back on the fact that we had promised to hand over the land to the Jewish people. And of course, Israel comes about miraculously, as the Bible talks about, a nation formed in a day in 1948. And we, from 1945 to 1948, unfortunately, at one point, Churchill made a very disparaging comment in regard to the fact that we already have enough Jews, maybe within the UK, etc., etc. And we shafted that. And of course, our mighty God doesn't forget that. It says in Genesis 12, I think verses 3-4, that if you bless my people, I will bless you. If you curse my people, I will curse you. And I firmly believe that. And we, in 1955, so as I say, we lost our nerve. And that was then the then Prime Minister, Harold Macmillan, and Ted Heath was in his government, or maybe foreign secretary, I'm not sure at that time. They then got together to have a discussion to say that they started to then look to Europe, because the common market really came about by 1955, 1956, 54, 55, it had the agreement within the steel industry that Germany and France would join together to produce steel. So they couldn't produce armaments to fire at each other. And traditionally within that dreadful battle fought by very brave men on both sides. You know, in the First World War, the Battle of Verdun, the amount of munitions and bombs coming in was shocking, was absolutely shocking. So they then brought that about. And of course, when we negotiated the deal with the Germans after the First World War and the Battle of with the Treaty of Versailles, we really put the Germans on their knees. We really put them on their knees. And you could actually, I mean, it is a big subject on one level, but and we start really going down the rabbit hole of what people would like to say conspiracy, and maybe, and to some extent we should. But they really set up Germany to then create a leader who then did what he did. But if we go back to 1948, so that in regard to that blessing curse, so 1955 we'd lost our nerve. By 1961 we applied, I believe the Conservatives then applied to join the European Union, and then and were turned down. And there's a really important thing to talk about in a minute of why, because all of that has relevance to what is happening now. And you know, both of you, brother man, brother champion, that if we forget history, we are profoundly foolish. We have to go back in history and we have to learn from people's mistakes. And of course, the classic wonderful verse in Hosea 4 verse 6, where it says, you know, my people are destroyed through lack of knowledge. Some biblical translations have my people perish, but I turn around and say my people are destroyed. It's an instant thing. And we have to have knowledge. You have to have knowledge of your wonderful history and your wonderful nation. And one of the problems, one of the reasons why you are in the problem that you are, is that civics has not been taught properly since 1973-ish, which is rather interesting. If we think about these dates, 1973, we go into Europe. There are some really interesting, and I'm just saying this, it just occurred to me, but if we're talking about Ephesians 6, if we say that we're not fighting against flesh and blood, but principalities and powers, these are principalities. And the European Union is a leg of global governance. It's a leg of that.
Mark, I want to bring up a little bit of history here, and I'm going to go back to the secular, but yeah, a couple things before I get into that. What you brought up about World War I, there's been, since it's been 100 years now since armistice, there's a lot out there, and I suggest to our viewers, if you haven't seen the couple videos that James Corbett's put on about with the World War I conspiracy, and then also Tom Woods has talked about how the World War I, he's interviewed some people, how it's totally changed the world as we know it today, and a lot of that is because of the Americans coming in and just so overwhelming and punishing the Germans that you're right that led to Hitler. But going back a little bit further in history, you know, our American fight for independence, and when our country formed, it was supposed to be individual states, and these were actually individual countries united for a certain purpose, but they were supposed to have sovereignty. And the Constitution laid out restrictions of what the federal government could do. And, you know, we tried to have our own Brexit, so to speak, in the 1860s with the South seceding. And really that was that was over tariffs, and that was over state, as far as states' rights. And the states were told from the beginning that the Union was voluntary, that they could leave at any time that they wanted. And of course, Lincoln, came in, and the South here calls this the American Civil War. They call it the War of Northern Aggression, because they feel that, Lincoln, started that with the attack on Fort Sumter and everything. But the war was not about slavery. In fact, Lincoln was in favor of slavery. He said he didn't want to end it. And only later into the war that when the North didn't really know why they were fighting, made it about slavery. And of course, when he did the Emancipation Proclamation, he freed the slaves in the South, which he had no control over, but didn't free the slaves in the North, which he did have control over. Another side note on that. But what I'm kind of getting at here is Lincoln sold this as this was an insurrection and treason, where it was always understood up to that point that the states could leave freely. And I guess I'm concerned maybe with what's going on there? Is there going to be some kind of false flag event? I mean, if the British people really push this, is there going to be something that happens over there that this is going to lead to war? Now, I think part of it, they're making it like, you know, how we sold the Civil War, where this is about slavery, and we did free the slaves, but now they're making this about migrants over there. What are you seeing there? Are you seeing any parallels that this may, is this going to escalate? You know, is this going to lead into some kind of physical conflict, or is this all right now just political? I guess what I'm getting at.
What a brilliant question. And first of all, thank you for what you said about your own American history, because not a lot of people know that. As they say, as a very famous phrase, a comedian who says that, they don't really know that. They don't know that understanding of the American Civil War. And again, you've asked a brilliant question. So let's look at 2015. If we go back to 2015 and with Putin, and I think on some show that I'd actually said this, you know, suddenly Putin's then kicked out of the G8. Suddenly Putin is shown the door. We don't want to know you. It was like a 1 minute, there's Tony Blair and, you know, Bush Jr. Saying we can do business with this man and all this kind of thing. I mean, let's remember who Putin is in regard to KGB and all this kind of thing. But it was all Russia, Russia, Russia building up in 2015. I don't have to repeat Russia, 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 because that's all you hear in regard to Mueller and all this kind of thing, and the Russians, and you know, how they've influenced the election and put President Trump in power, basically, is what they're trying to say. Oh, really? So the Ukraine, of course, that's a concern. My own and answering the question, brother man, I want to answer this, because again, we have to go back in history. If we look at the Ukraine, to me, the reason why my own understanding of this in regard to the Ukraine is that the then leader of the Ukraine was going to go with Russia, and then that prime minister changed his mind and then went with Europe, and then all this kind of thing happened, and you had this dreadful situation in the square where people, you know, there's a sniper hidden firing on both sides to cause chaos. Yeah. So, and there's a documentary that's come out that's been talking about these kind of issues. And then suddenly the NATO are moving tanks forward and all this kind of thing, and an excuse to attack Russia. From 2015, we'd either had that plane MH30 or whatever down, we'd had some other incidents. Now you said specifically a false flag. Well, the one that has actually been mooted, which is not false, and that hit the Times, or the Sunday Times, and has been backed up anecdotally by a friend of mine, Robert Hall, to the Bruges Group, is that Theresa May on the 9th of December, or around about that time, just less than 2 weeks, goes for a vote in regard to this supposed Brexit deal that she has negotiated. She was before a select committee of in the Commons a few days ago, that a wonderful website, which is Guido Fawkes, which I call a bit of the equivalent of Drudge that you have over there. Guido is fantastic. And gets various bits of information. And Theresa May is there, and there's a Freudian slip that I'm just trying to remember, where she says, you know, I'm just talking about the agreement that we have made on behalf of the European Union. Behalf of the United Kingdom. This Freudian slip. I mean, she may as well have just actually said what she meant in the first place without having a Freudian slip, because frankly, that is what is going on. So the false flag could be that the vote goes to the House of Commons, the 650, you know, odd MPs, full of, some of them need to be in the Tower of London right now, as far as I'm actually concerned. So we're going to see how this vote goes. I think it will be voted down. Then we could see a crash of the economy, brother man. Oh, I wonder how we're going to do that. Maybe I need to read The Creature from Jekyll Island very, very quickly and phone up E.G. Griffin, because he will certainly give us the answers. We need to suddenly restrict money supply, or we move a few digits on a computer system as we have now. So that could be a reality. And then, I mean, the fact that you're even announcing this, the fact that it's even mooted in the Sunday Times, which is rather interesting, this bastion of respect, supposedly, you know, respectable journalism. It was even mentioned, I believe, in that other right-wing bastion. I mean, sorry, left-wing bastion, The Guardian. It was even mentioned there. So to create fear. I mean, for crying out loud, to create fear. So you're telling me that Germany, the maker of BMWs, the owner of, you know, the new, the classic new Mini that we remake over here, that BMW and Audi will not be continue to sell cars to the UK. The fact that the French will not want to continue to send champagne, cheese and whatever to the UK. You have got to be joking. Of course they will do. Now, the European Union, my own understanding of this is that there's 5.4 million jobs within the European Union that rely on trade with us, and we have 3.4 million jobs relying on trade with them. So actually, as far as I'm concerned, we are in a very, very powerful position. We, you know, personally, I don't want to deal. I think we should just walk away. We need to read Donald Trump's book, as I've said on many occasions, The Art of the Deal, and actually be not be afraid to actually walk away. So when you talk about a false flag, it could be that. It could be that it's economically. You have got, if in a sense you're alluding to this because you've got these caravans that have been coming up from you know, through South America, through into Mexico, at the border of California with that town, or in that Mexican town, and trying to force their way into the United States of America, not holding any American flags to sort of endear themselves to you, but holding whatever South American country that they're coming from. And it all seems, all the timing of this is all rather interesting. In regard to other things, I can't really comment. I can't really comment. What I can say, I think, you know, economically, if that's what you want to do, there is a movement to try and create letters in the press to get companies to write in and say, we think this deal was fantastic. There is a propaganda war going on, brother man. You know, the Prime Minister, I can't even say the same words in the same sentence. You know, Prime Minister Theresa May. It's a shock, dreadful. The worst, as far as I'm concerned, the worst Prime Minister in living memory. And outside Gordon Brown, that really does take the biscuit. And someone who is, to me, is bordering on absolute treason. Brexit means Brexit, Theresa May once said. We're all Brexiteers now. No, it doesn't seem as though we are, because you have handed over the negotiations of us leaving the European Union to that well-known lefty in the 90s, Ollie Robbins, who is a civil servant, who in the 90s, I believe, thanks to the wonderful research by Guido Fawkes, etc., who wrote an article in the 90s celebrating the fact that wasn't Stalin a really, really sort of wonderful person. Now, as far as I'm concerned, I think he murdered quite a few million people within his country.
You know, Mark, I think they may be just, and this is my opinion, but I'm thinking back to FDR when he wanted to get in World War II, and he knew the American people didn't want to do it, so he was provoking Japan and the Germans at the same time for the excuse, and he didn't care which one popped first. He just wanted someone to attack the United States. And I'm just wondering if they're doing that with the economics, with Russia, to provoke something, to have something go on. So there's fear, there's panic, and you know, us Europeans, we need to stick together now because of the economy, because of Russia. So I've just,
you're asking a brilliant question. You're absolutely asking that. Excuse me, because there has been this whole thing of, you know, Russia, look what they're doing, isn't it appalling? I mean, in regard to the whole sort of oil price and stuff like that, I mean, if we get quickly, we'll talk about another country in one sense, but it's all part of that. It's like with Syria, you know, 2010, I think Global Research talked about this, which is a pipeline goes in the wrong direction, not benefiting Europe. So it's like Oh, right, now we need to bomb the heck out of Syria. Now we need to sort that out, maybe because it doesn't have a central bank, et cetera, et cetera. Other than, you know, a bit like, let's go into Libya because he wanted to start an African currency, backed by, Gaddafi did, backed by gold, you know, so we have to go in there and destroy that. But there's another pipeline there, and suddenly Russia gets involved in that, as you know, backing Assad and all the rest. So it's this, and you're fighting these wars by proxy. You're not necessarily putting troops on the ground there, but you're fighting by proxy. And of course, I don't have to tell you that, you know, Benghazi, Obama and Hillary gun running, and all the way to Nusra and every other nut job to fight Assad. And then, as a dear friend has explained on the radio many number of years ago, and it has made the rounds again, about the fact that you've got these rocket launchers from you know, ground to air rocket launchers that were put in, that should not have been, found themselves in the hands of various terrorists. Hence why Ambassador Stevens went out to find out where they are and to get these back. That is what it was all about. That's why there is this huge cover up. And then suddenly they take down one of your helicopters with very brave men and women on board. Fortunately, the helicopter wasn't blown to bits. And then they go and find out where the serial numbers are on these rocket launchers, and they trace it all back. You know, so why Mr. Obama and Mrs. Hillary Clinton are not in Gitmo, I really, you know, that's another subject maybe for later on. I really don't know. So, you know, treason is lie, you know, truth is treason in the empire of lies. You know, we've got this on both sides of the pond. And for me, and I come back to this, it's always been about a sovereignty issue, Steve. So yes, you're right. You're right about what could be doing, which is, oh, we must stick together to fight Putin. Do you think the Russians really want a war? No, of course they don't. They've got children just as much as we have. You know, so all of this, you are right. All of this is playing out. Suddenly it'd be like the CBI, the Institute, British, you know, Business Institute, blah blah blah, turning around and saying, well, no, it's going to hit various companies doing this. Then we have that, you know, that well-known respecter of economic brilliance, Carney, who runs the Bank of England, and who I think maybe left Canada because he didn't do particularly very well over there. So he then comes over here. I'm not sure whether he used to work for Morgan Stanley or whatever. I think one of them in the past. So, you know, he was saying, oh, if we vote to leave the EU, then the whole of the economy will come crashing down and all this sort of stuff. No, it hasn't. In fact, unemployment has gone down. Employment has gone up. We are still here. You're absolutely right. So if we sense like a false flag, maybe, you know, we're all going to get together to maybe fight Putin. That's a very fair point that you're making. If it's another economic false flag, that's easy to do. Fiddle a few digits. I mean, people I know who are in the banking sector, blah, 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 they'd look at me and think you're raving mad, where you and I know something different. We also know that in the Bank of England and in the Federal Reserve, you know, there is no money or gold. It's just printing presses that you and I pay for, you know, to pay back with interest. There is no debt. You know, read the book. You know, read the book. E.G. Griffin, Creature of Jekyll Island.
I know Brother Champion's going to want to tie all this in with prophecy soon, but if people watching can't tell, I'm kind of the political guy, and Brother Champion is more the prophecy guy. But I want to get you brought up about so much of this is tied together, and I know our audience may say, what does Brexit have to do with the U.S.? And, you know, we're tied together. We're into all of this now. And by studying what's going on there, you know, we can see what's going to happen here and vice versa. But you had brought up a little bit earlier about the caravans. And, you know, you get on social media and there's the memes and Soros is being blamed for funding this or being really behind this, helping instigate this. And I just wonder, Soros is a problem over in Europe too.
Yes, big time.
But I'm just wondering, you know, the U.S., for example, we won World War II. We held off Germany. We've frozen Iranian assets. We've blockaded countries. We won the Cuban Missile Crisis. We have the reserve currency. We're, you know, have these big vote. I mean, we're a Security Council in the UN. my point being, the powerful United States, how can we be a victim of a billionaire, and why can't we stop a billionaire? Or why can't any country do that? I mean, really, if these countries, if Soros was the danger that everybody's saying he is, I think he's the front man, and they want him there, and they want the focus there, because by keeping the focus on Soros, we're not watching something else, what's going on behind the scenes. If he was really that threat, I'm not saying he's a good guy and he's doing something bad, but if they wanted to take him down, they could probably freeze his assets like this, and he would no longer be a billionaire or a threat. What do you think about that? Do you think that Soros is a diversion here? I know he's bad, but why aren't they taking out Soros if he's really this threat, if he's funding all these groups?
Well, we're all asking that question. I mean, at least Hungary's awake. Hungary has banned him. He's banned his Open Society. I think there was another country, wasn't there, in regard to assets? I mean, Soros, funding various NGOs to be on boats, to be off, as Paul Joseph Watson has brilliantly revealed, in regard to boats off the coast of Libya and all this kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, I hear you really loudly, and I wonder that as well. I really wonder that as well. Why do we not freeze this guy's assets, etc.? Or does it mean that he is profoundly powerful? Remember, in 1992, this is the man that broke the Bank of England. It's the reason why we were bounced out of the exchange rate mechanism, and the fact that we pinned the value of our pound with the value of the Deutschmark. But again, John Major then hadn't read The Art of the Deal by President Trump and pegged it at a price that was profoundly not beneficial in our favor. I agree with you. I think I don't think it's just him. I think there's all sorts of things, a number of other people. I mean, we look at social media. So you then look at Google, you then look at Facebook, they're just as bad in regard to Facebook. It's shadow banning. It's kicking friends of mine off Facebook. It's shadow banning all sorts of things. I heard a rumor a couple of days ago that Twitter's share price has actually gone down. Good. If Dorsey, got no sympathy there, shadow banning people, getting rid of people all over the place, so it's joint like that. Brother man, going back to what you're saying, you are absolutely right. I don't understand that. Just a quick note on what you were saying about the Second World War with FDR is that in 1937, I understand that I've forgotten the author's name that talk about this. Maybe it was Jim Mars. Yes, Jim Mars. And there's another book as well that talks about this, where you had naval exercises in 1937, and you invited the Japanese to come and watch. So look at that in regard to long-term planning. And that's the other thing. These people seem to be, they're in it for the long term. We are not, we forget this. We're looking at the short term. We need to start looking in the long term. You're absolutely right. Why it's all Soros with the left hand, why the right hand is doing something else, and then the elites are going up through the middle. And it's what you have constantly talk about at times, is that Hegelian dialectic. So it's the playoff. And that's why you've just alluded to, in regard to your presidency, the presidential race of 2016, and what we now see and what's gone on, and my own understanding of this. And to some extent, we may agree to disagree on some of this, but we do have there is a deep state. Alex Newman, a friend of mine who's brilliant on this, talks about this. There is a deep state. It's been revealed. We have a deep state. Our deep state is 44 years of not running our country, because we lost the sovereignty in 1973, and it was handed over to a bunch of civil servants, who've been running our country. And anecdotally, two friends of mine were recently having a meeting with our local MP, actually. Won't reveal we are, but we have a local MP. And, some young upstart comes down, comes into the room absolutely appalled. She works at the Foreign Office and saying, we've been there for 250 years. How dare these people vote to leave Europe? We are the people that know what's best for this country. Well, that's the problem. They don't know what's best for this country. And it's called a democracy. You have a representative republic. We have a democracy, and democracy spoke. So sorry, I'm slightly gone off on a little bit of a tangent there. So Soros is so well connected and extremely well off. The fact that he made, I think, maybe a couple of billion in pounds or whatever in regard to when he bet, you know, he took on, let's just say this, he took on the economy of our country, and he won.
Right, and but yeah, it's there's something else going on there, and like you say, it's that Hegelian dialectic. Well, I can't say that, but is it MI5 is like your CIA there?
MI6 is the internal within the UK. MI5 is international.
Okay, well they could, if they want to take out, they could assassinate him. How many other leaders have they assassinated? I mean, if they wanted to take out Soros. But guess what? I imagine as he engineers this stuff, what happens is the deep state keeps getting bigger and bigger. George Soros is the false flag, or at least one of them, I think.
But it could be. I mean, the other thing is then if you take, I'm reading partly about this. It's mentioned in the book, The History of Europe and the Great Deception, written by Richard North and Christopher Booker. And I made I produced and directed a piece on that in 2016, where it explains how the UK can leave the European Union and protect its economy, right? In many ways, as soon as we voted to leave, it was irrelevant, but actually in some ways now it's profoundly relevant. But the Marshall Plan had the CIA were influencing the setting up of the European Union, right? Bilderberg. People go, oh, conspiracy. We know it's not. Look at the people that attend. Look at the people that attend Davos. Are you telling me that all these powerful people are discussing, you know, their children and what they're going to have for tea? You got to be joking. They're discussing how they can make money and how they can influence people and all the rest, how they can influence a particular economy to get what they want, a country. And as you know, basically, if you've got control of the money supply, as is either Rothschild or said this, you've then got control of the country. You know, you've got control of that. So again, the Marshall Plan, the CIA in there, in regard to the, I think in their book, they address it as some kind of liberal conspiracy theory. Well, the Bilderberg is not a liberal conspiracy theory. The Bilderberg, even more over the last few years, it has because of people like Alex Jones on InfoWars, because of other people, a particular young man, I can't think of his name at the moment, but because of the internet, because of the spread of all the individual channels, all of this is what has been going on. You know, they've been revealing all this. So this is a secret society. This is people getting together. It's a bit like, when Kerry and Bush Jr. say that they're both members of Skull and Bones and then deny it. That's your Hegelian dialectic again, brother man. That is what revealed. This is the parallel. I think I might have mentioned this on the last program, but this is the key parallel between your presidential race of 2016 and our Brexit race. The parallel was that it revealed, whatever you think of then Donald Trump, and as you know, I said from day one, supported the man and still do, that he then seemed to come from totally outside, was not a politician, was not a part of the GOP, was not a Republican or whatever, and previously would have described himself as, a Democrat and just doing The Apprentice and being a very, very successful businessman. And then suddenly comes into the political fray, and as far as I'm concerned, is doing absolutely brilliantly, right? Yes, there are some people around him that may be part of the Trilateral Commission, the Council of Foreign Relations and all this. And you and I would just go through and go, kick them out, kick them out, kick them out. There's a fight going on. That's the deep state fighting back. But when you have got a situation where, your economy is something like 4 to 4.8% growth, you've got the lowest unemployment ever recorded since 1973. And when they're constantly going, you racist, I don't like the hyphenated, but we'll say because you're all Americans over there, whatever color or background that you come from, because that's why you do that. You go through the legal channels to become citizens of the United States of America, and you pledge allegiance to the country and to the flag. And you know, God willing, you're looking at the Constitution and you have an understanding of it. So that, you know, you go through that. And then black unemployment is the lowest it has been in recorded history. And then you have 400 incredible black conservative people meeting in the White House about 3 weeks ago with people like David Harris Jr., Jesse Owens, etc. I've forgotten that, Candace Owens, etc., and others meeting in the White House. That kind of thing has never happened. Well, of course, it would never have happened under LBJ, and it never happened under Barack Hussein Obama, who you know, is mixed race. Never happened like that. So you've got all those kind of things, but it revealed, look at the deep state, the fight, the fact that the Mueller thing is going on, costing millions and millions of dollars. I mean, that man is, as far as I'm concerned, responsible for, what was it, taking uranium-1 to either the Russians or the Canadians in this brown envelope deal where Hillary Clinton gets $42 million or whatever. I think that was reported either in the Washington Post. We're not making it up. That came out in 2015. So you've got all these kind of things going on. The deep state is being revealed and revealed and revealed. Over here, we revealed it. There is no doubt about it, as President Trump had said, that it inspired him. Brexit inspired him and inspired Steve Bannon. It inspired them in regard to what they were trying to do. And we then voted to leave. And we then discovered, in leading up to this, that if you take all the different parties that we have, so if you take the Liberal Party, if you take the Labour Party, if you take the Conservative Party, I'm just going through names, not necessarily what they actually represent or what they should represent. Then you've got the Welsh Nats, then you've got the Scotch Nats, then you've got the Democratic Unionist Party, and then you've got Sinn Féin, whatever. Now, the fact is, if all of those parties are saying, we really think, except the DUP, Democratic Unionist Party, and the reason why that's important, the DUP were basically, they are the Conservatives in Northern Ireland. They became the DUP, I think, in 1972, just before, you know, the run-up to us voting to go into the European Union. They always objected. So if every single party within Parliament is going, we really think you need to stay in the EU, you then end up thinking, are we living in a one-party state? We're living in a communist structure. So that began, and I hadn't, you know, we didn't know, we weren't using that word, the deep state. Then you have begun to, that has gone totally into your vocabulary over the last year, right? In America, you know, suddenly this conspiracy of the deep state is not a conspiracy, it's real. It's come into your vocabulary. We then discovered that many of our MPs in the House of Commons voted to stay within the European Union. Now, okay, that's their right under the democracy that we have. I respect that. But what I absolutely me off big time, trying not to swear, is the fact that 17,410,752 people were the majority of over 1 million that was told by David Cameron that it's a once and for all vote, that if you vote to leave, that's it. Everything is, you know, we're leaving. And that is being a massive attempt to be reversed and to not be respected. So we have realized that many of our MPs, as far as I'm concerned, should be in the Tower of London for treason. You know, democracy, if this does not go through, then, and you going back to your earlier question, brother man, if this doesn't go through and they do whatever they can to throw everything they can at it to stop it going through. I mean, let's just make something very plain. I love Europe. I've been to Europe many, many times, and I most probably will continue maybe in the future to go, even though I seem to be flying in the opposite direction. I have the privilege to fly to your wonderful part of the world. And I love Europe, but I do not like European governance. It's a socialist Marxist structure. It is not democratic. You can't vote these people in. And what happens is that if a country votes against a particular treaty that the European Union wants to put through, then they go, oh, could you have another vote on it very soon? And in fact, could you just keep voting until you give us what we want? Right. So if you take the Lisbon Agreement is they call it an agreement, but actually it was the European Constitution. And I believe France and Holland in 2005 turned it down. So they then change it. They then do a sleight of hand. Ta-da! Here we are. We're just going to change the name and hope that you're all so thick and that you're not paying attention. But you know as well as I do over there is that people are working so hard to make a living and keep their families and body and soul together, that all this skullduggery that's going on is that sleight of hand because we're not paying attention to it. So that has gone on, so we have discovered our deep state, and our deep state has been one of the other key things is in 1998, if you take the Conservative Party, now to me, the people at the top are not conservative in that true sense. I find them liberal progressives as far as I'm concerned. So to me, Theresa May is a socialist and a blue coat. I have said that a number of times. To then find out in the last election, I might have alluded, I think I mentioned this when last time we were together, was the fact that she had two advisors, Nick Timothy and Fiona Hill, who were paid about £130,000 each, right? They were advisors. And when she won, when she became prime minister, they were like gatekeepers. There'd be other ministers phoning up to, speak to the prime minister, and they'd be answering the phone. No, I'm really sorry. She's not here at the moment, or whatever. I mean, this is just outrageous. So who is actually running the country? And the key thing is about Theresa May is that she does, to me, she's not a conviction politician. She's suddenly, which Margaret Thatcher was, whatever people thought of her, she was a conviction politician. She had ideals and she stuck to them, right? It'd be a bit like, Theresa May to me is a bit like Dick Cheney. Bush Jr. and the fact that Dick Cheney was running the administration. Dick Cheney had already got the maps out and worked out, there's the oil, let's invade. In simple, I don't mean it in simple terms, but that is what it comes down to. And of course, Dick Cheney made that very clever comment, which is, I've never told the people in Wisconsin, I think, that I'm a member of the of the Trilateral or the Council of Foreign Relations. So then all this whole thing of the deep state being revealed. So we have had that. And we suddenly, I want to come on to this subject in a little while, but there's, in regard to decimalisation, in the fact that she had these two advisors. She believes in, so what do you think? What do you think? Well, let's do this. So she's a bit like, she's a wonderful head girl of a private school, but she's never going to be the headmistress or the leader. She's very good at taking policy, being given policy, and then to lead that out. I mean, this is a woman, and under the David Cameron government, that was asked to oversee as Home Secretary, the longest service Home Secretary, I think, in our country's history, was asked to oversee cutting of the police force, or even backroom staff, where they would cut them, of up to 40,000 up and down the country. Now, anecdotally, I know this because in the Midlands, in the middle of our country, dear friends of mine live there, and they've seen police stations and stuff like this shut down, resources and stuff shut down under the whole thing of austerity and all this kind of thing. So she is very good at doing that. But when you suddenly realize that she appoints a civil servant as Ollie Robbins, who is not an elected MP, slowly we'd seen David Davis leave and other people leave who are Brexiteers, who are trying to negotiate. And David Davis left because he suddenly realized that the only sort of face-to-face negotiating he was going to have with Europe was something like an hour a week or something like this. You know, we've had Tusk and we've had Barnier all playing games. And the reason why they want to treat us so badly and shaft us, frankly, is because they don't want any other country coming along going, we want a referendum. And by the way, we want to leave. And by the way, we're going to win and we are going to leave. They don't want that kind of thing to play out. So when you've got Ollie Robbins as a civil servant negotiating, you know, on behalf of the European Union, how we should stay in the European Union, because that is what's going on to us. This is, you know, this is absolutely appalling. So that deep state, that is what has been revealed. And your deep state is suddenly like, you know, the circuit 9 judges and all this kind of thing, where, you know, President Trump goes, we need to stop people coming from various countries into our country. And then a circuit 9 judge goes, no. And then you suddenly realize that there are a load of other Obama leftovers hidden all over the place, who agreed with that administration, but do not agree with the administration of President Trump, and will do whatever they can to make sure that the policies are not put through. I mean, this is outrageous. You know, whatever people think, he's president of the United States. That's it. The Congress is then, you know, making, well, now this is going to be interesting, making, you know, should be making the laws. The thing with Obama is, as he said, I've got a pen, I've got a phone, and I've also got total abuse of executive power. So I'm going to now empower the IRS to go after 1 or 2 people, along with all the other alphabet soup agencies, to do whatever I can. He completely and utterly stepped outside the framework of what he could in regard to the executive branch. And you can argue now that Theresa May is doing exactly the same. And where she is stepping out, and this is where it goes back to tying up what you say, the parallels. That's why I'm, as you know, I feel absolutely passionate about the United States of America, and I've said it publicly on a number of times, that if you go down, Western civilization may as well kiss its butt goodbye. It goes. The Judeo-Christian heritage, it goes, right? And I believe that, and I'm saddened that I've said it publicly. I need to do my Hillsdale course in regard to understanding your constitution. I'm sad that not enough. We need civics. We need civics online. We all need to be contributing to that, to educate the 320 legal people that live in your country about your constitution. And it's like over here in regard to our rights, etc. So suddenly we have a prime minister that's created a deal, which means that we will not be, Steve, just to give an update, the deal says this, is that Article 50 was put in nearly 2 years ago. It'll be 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago next March. Article 50, which was part of the Lisbon Agreement, was an agreement, a piece of paper that enabled any particular country that wanted to leave the European Union to have a way of doing that, which was to take Article 50 and to say, right, we're now leaving. And I have to say, my own understanding of this, which is rather incredible, is that Article 50 didn't exist until the Lisbon Agreement. So it was a bit like that song, the Hotel California, you will never leave. And then miraculously, through prayer, I'm sure that, and God's hand, that Article 50 was then put in. So the whole thing is that they want an extended transition. They want to extend the transition period by 21 months, maybe even more. So going back to your comment, or maybe a false flag or this kind of thing, on what could happen. One thing that's been put forward, and a friend of mine was explaining this to me, that she might have done a secret deal with Tusk to actually extend Article 50 as a transition, to actually extend that without maybe telling us. But the deal is there to say there's going to be a transition period while we negotiate fishing rights and a few other things, right? You don't leave something without negotiating a proper deal. But the Conservatives had form on this, and this is what's really important. As Ted Heath was starting to negotiate joining the European Union in 1973. We had, as I said, we had applied in 61, we'd applied in 67, we got turned down. We applied by a Conservative government 61, we got turned down, and we applied under a Labour government in 1967. We both got turned down. And the reason why Charles de Gaulle said, no, don't want you to join, you trade with the rest of the world, is because he hadn't put in place what's called the Common Agricultural Policy. He hadn't negotiated a deal that would benefit French farmers, which would make sure that there would be no riots, even though there were, and they would be backing him. His government would be solid. They would be backing him. So the Common Agricultural Policy is subsidies, right? That's something that you are aware of on your side of the pond in regard to subsidies. So when Clinton was negotiating NAFTA and GAFTA and all this kind of thing, and why suddenly, jobs moved and all this kind of thing. So subsidies, etc. So de Gaulle then made sure that the Common Agricultural Policy was in place. And the reason why he turned us down is that if we had joined earlier, we would have made sure that the Common Agricultural Policy would not have benefited the French, basically, or any other country. We would have made sure that this needs to be fairer. And Ted Heath taking us in, and this is madness. I mean, he then agreed to pay, I believe, 12.5% immediately of the Common Agricultural Policy, not even understanding maybe how much money would be paid into that in regard to the Common Agricultural Policy, not explaining that to the British people. And then soon after, by about 2 years, that would then go up to 18.5%. He then at the same time stopped, and you remember our empire, stopped trading with all the Commonwealth countries. He shafted Commonwealth countries. So again, to say to people, us having the privilege to talk to people, to understand this, is that the common market, it's a single market. It's just the nation states within the European Union. That's the single market, right? Well, as far as I know, there is the rest of the world. And that's what we need to remember to be trading with. And that's why, President Trump is going, I'm ready to do a deal. I've been ready to do a deal for over a year. And just on a note, the reason why I keep saying President Trump is that it does annoy me within the press, wherever they can. They don't want to call him President Trump. They just want to call him Donald Trump, as if he's an irrelevance. They want to just wipe the slate clean and just say no, I mean, they do call him President Trump, but I remember recently watching something on Sky where they're calling him Donald Trump, and it just annoyed me. Right. He is president.
They should have done that with Obama, who was really never the president because he didn't have a birth certificate.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Absolutely. The press,
just opposite.
We had that incident a few weeks back with Acosta in the White House, and I watched that. And it's just the way the press treats him, whether you agree with him or not. There needs to be some level of respect.
Absolutely. And that's not journalism. That isn't journalism, brother man. That is what is called outright. Hold on a minute. We disagree with your policy. This is what the policy should be. It's not journalism. They're not reporting what's going on.
It felt like he was just like a guy that was in front of the assassin that was about to come in and saying, well, look, just get rid of him.
That's right.
It's like, what are they going to do next?
Yeah, well, you know what? The press does not have the right to be in the White House. So if they're not gonna be respectful, that's his house while he's president.
That's right.
And he can say you're not welcome anymore unless you act a certain way. And
Obama kicked out all kinds of people through journalists in jail. And
if I was Trump and then that judge ruled that, I'd just say, well, no more press conferences at the White House.
Well, that's what he should do. That's what he should do. And also, Michael, the journalist, I think, is it Michael Hastings, suddenly, sadly gets killed, and then Andrew Breitbart, and we just go, and other people, we just go on and on and on. I mean, sorry, we digress, but that whole Acosta incident was frankly, in my opinion, was outrageous, and he certainly had the right surname, isn't it? Acosta. I'm going to accost the president. I think someone else said that. I'm not, maybe not I'm not that smart, but they said that, they used that word. And I think also, if you look into his background, maybe his well, working for CNN, his politics are particularly left leaning. I mean, can I just say this? I am, whatever people think, right, respect the office. And since we last spoke, we had that blimp, you know, in London, this balloon, this protest against Donald Trump, this creator. I mean, personally, I was extremely embarrassed and extremely angry about that. I just think, you know, okay, people have a right to protest, but respect the office. And I remember sending a message, a Facebook message, to a number of dear friends on your side of the pond, and I have a number, including yourselves, and I sent a message going, next time we ask you to send your landing craft, I do not blame you if you don't turn up. We are being profoundly dismissive of you, which is rude, which is so rude and insulting. You know, we could argue till the cows come home, you know, like some people have said. I mean, even I've said it. I remember a number of years ago being in Florida and someone said over there, well, if it wasn't for us, you wouldn't have won the Second World War. And I said, yes, but you were a little bit late. Yeah, you know, and it's all this kind of thing. And that, you know, we have to get over that, understandably, that cultural bravado, which I respect, right? I totally respect. And, you know, and if you're going to watch films like Saving Private Ryan, you then get an understanding of the sacrifice that your country made and others. So we are being profoundly dismissive, profoundly disrespectful. We only have to look at what Macron said on Remembrance Sunday, you know, a couple of weeks ago, and having a go at nationalism and all this kind of thing. You know, what is wrong with putting your nation first? It means that if other people put their nation first, then they're going to work hard to build their nation up as well. And not this cultural Marxist groupthink of we'll take your money and we'll move it around, and then we can create the global governance that the UN want in 12 years' time. I mean, you know, I find the dismissiveness of you, our past links, profoundly disgusting and rude. Of course, not everyone's perfect. Your past isn't, and nor are we. We've gone into regime changes and all the rest. But going back to your president and what's happened in regard to the White House and what was happening there, no, this is disgusting. I mean, even criticize, you know, every time. Oh, let's have a go at Melania over the fact that she's put Christmas trees to the red. So you had white ones last time, you got red ones this time, and now you're going to have blue ones next year. Good for her. This is about, I'm being a patriot. I am a citizen of this country. I am, you know, I am the First Lady. I want to honor this country and honor its traditions. And all people can do. I have never seen, sorry, I'm slightly going on my rant as a side issue on this, but I have never, ever seen such criticism of a leader, which means that, as far as I'm concerned, he's doing the right thing, and that the deep state are in a massive tailspin. And as soon as we start to see arrests and Hillary Clinton in Gitmo, etc., to me, the better. The evidence is there. And of course, you and I could debate for a good hour of why that isn't happening, partly because of why people are covering this up on that up. If these indictments are true, then let's start to see some action, instead of seeing the deliberate play out of, you know, threatening Mr. Corsi, or threatening Cohen, or threatening or Manafort on all this kind of thing that are going on. Let's just reveal, you know, the truth will come out. But it is one of my pet hates at the moment, which is to be so dismissive of the fact that I'm sorry, I was going to say, because when Macron said that, maybe President Trump should have stood up and said, well, I think we saved your asses in the last two Second World War, and last two World Wars, so we won't bother turning up again. I wouldn't blame him.
But I think, well, something has to happen soon, as far as putting a stop to all this open criminal activity to outlaw anybody that's not a globalist. I mean, it's like you mentioned, Jerome Corsi or whoever, whoever's being, banned from the internet or being sued for, just being, conservative or, Republican. Well, then if they get by with that, then the Christians, all Christians will be next. I mean, it's like a stepping stone.
We are, the big thing that you need to learn from is that we are seeing, an attack and an unfolding, deliberate through the an atheistic, humanistic construct, which is the European Union, and no respecter of the Christian faith, which has a huge heritage within Europe. That's the big thing that you need to learn of that's being undermined. I mean, I understand from a dear friend of mine, Ray Gaynor, was talking about this the other day, and a big plug for lastdayswarriors.com, which I have contributed to. He was talking about this the other day, which is the amount of churches that are closing and dying on your side of the pond. That's
several thousand a year. Several thousand a year. I saw that. Yeah. Well, we need to. We're a little over an hour, so we need to start wrapping up. Champion, anything else that you'd like to ask?
Mark? I know that we were going to talk about. Well, you visited the United States a couple times. You said you're speaking at a convention, and I believe you also said a few months ago you were at the convention down there in Branson.
No, I couldn't go. I couldn't go to Branson, which is a real shame, and I hope to be there. But I was in Montana, speaking at the convention. This West is our West. There was about just over 100 people in the room, including Ammon Bundy and Jeanette Finicum and Alex Newman. And I had the privilege to give a brief address about the European Union as well. For me, coming from the UK and having the utter privilege to meet Jeanette Finicum and Ammon and his wife is not something that happens to someone in the UK. So it was talking about the whole conference, which was run by a dear friend of mine, Laura Lee O'Neill, was talking about land rights. The restriction of land rights, the BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, trying to force people off the land. I mean, in Montana, they've seen 22,000 miles of roads closed in regard to access, right? Which is a huge issue, and a huge issue in regard to maybe getting even fire trucks and etc. in certain areas. So this whole thing, the whole thing of maybe we want to make the whole of Montana into an animal sanctuary. Agenda 21, Agenda 30, and all this kind of thing. And Debbie Guadalupe was there, who's an expert on that. And then you had Dan Happel from joining the Dots Radio, etc. And Alex was talking about the deep state. And it was brilliant because we had to encourage you. We had the International Guardian there. The event in time, all these films will come out about that. And we had the International Guardian there. The Southern Poverty Law Centre did a hit piece on us. There was a few protesters down the road. It was amazing. And then you had wonderful speakers like Elaine Willman, who was an expert on First Nations and tribal lands and all the rest, which is a fascinating subject in regard to who they are linked with and shouldn't be, because that's all undermining America. So for someone to the UK to come over there and meet with fellow Christians, patriots who are standing on the constitution of your country, and to have an incredible history lesson and other lessons was Matt Shea, who's a local politician and spoken, was there, etc. was quite astounding for me. I found it very, very moving, particularly when Jeanette Finicum was speaking. As far as I'm concerned, I was just bawling my eyes out throughout the whole presentation, seeing what her dear husband, Lavoie, had actually laid down his life for what he believed in. That I cannot even put in words that, and to be able to have a one-to-one conversation with that amazing woman who's presently doing a tour. And I'd say to anyone, if she's coming to your town, go to that event and Mark her, the producer, was there. What was incredible was that the night before, guys, a decision was made to put the press at the front, and I then suggested that we need to pray over this table where the press are. And we did. And out of that, and I will share this, I need to find the article to share it with you. Out of that came an article in The Guardian that some people might have thought was a bit of a hit piece. I don't think it was. It mentioned the fact that Mark Hurst stood up, lambasted the press for the way that they treated Jeanette Finicum, and quite rightly. And as he said, the way you treated my friend, the way you treated this story, the way you treated the Lavoie, printed it and on all these kind of things, absolutely lambasted them, went for them, and it was brilliant. And then Alex Newman did the same, but he said, I'm going to pray for you from the front. And he then led us all in prayer to pray for the press. And the reason I want to say that is because it was just so powerful. And it comes to something that's so powerful in the fact that, you know, we are dealing with principalities and powers, and we just need to remember that and to take, you know, with putting our armor on to take these things on in God's strength, you know. That's what's really important. Can I know we're wrapping up. Can I just quickly mention something, because, and I'm going to talk about this again. The penny dropped for me yesterday, literally. A dear friend of mine, Peter over here, who's an expert on Peter Airy, who's an expert on coinage because of some of the creative pieces he makes. We talked about decimalization, and decimalization is what the European coinage is. So remember this, we joined the common market, we joined the European Union in 1973. In 1968, a decision was made, I think then, by the Labour government under Harold Wilson to change our coinage into decimal coinage. That decision was made in 1968. We joined in 1973. And yesterday I had a bit of a revelation, and then thought, why didn't I realize this a while ago? I've just joined some more dots up. So to give you an idea, and this gets a little bit complicated, our pound before decimalization was worth 240 pennies, right? When decimalization came along, they reduced it into a smaller number to say that our pound had 100 pennies in it. You could technically argue that our money was halved, right? So you then had a 10 pence was brought in 1968 to replace the shilling. And we had some very beautiful coins, and it reflected history, and it reflected, frankly, an independent country. So there was a committee set up and all this, that Prince Philip, yes, another subject, was involved in, and all this kind of thing. So the public, the British public, were not asked, brother man, brother champion, whether we wanted to get rid of our old coinage. They were not asked. It was just a decision that was made. So we had already begun to have it dropped into our psyche, decimalization, European progressiveness. Let's join this lot, right? Of course, from 1961 throughout the whole of the 60s, much to some people didn't realize this, that all that negotiation was going on, because when we did go in 1973, Ted Heath had won the election, 72, I think. And then he said in his manifesto, a small paragraph that says, I will take us into the European Union. Again, the people weren't us. But it fascinated me, the fact, and I'm going to talk about this tomorrow or another time, but the fact that we got rid of our coinage, guys, we got rid of our heritage. We weren't even asked. And you could technically argue that the value of it then went down. And
sort of what happened here, where, you know, a 1 ounce of silver used to be $1.
That's right. That's right.
And, you know, well, what happened to that?
Well, ask President Nixon.
Yeah.
But we can't. But all that's supposed to come back. But yeah. So I just found that fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. That again, it comes down to the long game. The long game decision was made in 1955. Maybe even before that. Of course, it was made before that in 1923. And the fact that we as an independent country, we then lost our coinage. And of course, in 1973, we lost our sovereignty.
In 1968, okay, when was the Club of Rome, where it divides up the planet into, you know, 10 regions, you know, you know, like the 10 toes.
Yep.
Talking about parallelism between east and west, 2 legs.
Mm. Mm.
Okay, 10 toes, decimalization.
Well,
I'm seeing all this. We're
yeah.
recognizing the deep state. Well, what's the deep state? The Revelation 13, one world government, one world religion, and it's like, okay, like talk about Hosea chapter 4. God's
My people are destroyed. Yeah.
For lack of knowledge, but it's because we reject knowledge. So now, God's bringing all this stuff out in the open. We're seeing, okay, you voted to, England or UK voted to leave the European Union, and that's being totally ignored. So, okay, that's being revealed as, you've been taken over unless you do something about it. Outside of an election, or what's next, or our elections over here is all, all the voter fraud.
Well, your midterms voter fraud has been disgusting. But then again, I think they've been doing that for years. I mean, my concern is that they're going to get so good at this. What does it mean for 2020?
Right. So what's next? The stuff's out in the open now. So
yeah.
What's the next step? We can't just vote for stuff. We have to do something. I believe prayer. Repentance is the main thing, to hold these things off, like Nineveh repented, or we see Israel or Judah did some repentance, and God held off destruction for a while, and I think it's more like that. God, give us a little bit more time to get things straight, get our house in order. But eventually, the world government, the world religion's coming. We see it started already, but there's some things that we could do, repent, pray. We know, there's some things that we can focus on.
Absolutely, and we got to push back. And may I say, Brother Champion, that one thing that people should have done, and there are certain Christians on your side of the pond that didn't. It's up to them whether they want to vote, which way they want to vote. But if they're voting Democrat and they're supposedly Christians, haven't they worked out how the Democrats view abortion? I mean, come on, I'm not just saying this to be big. I had the privilege to stand outside with a dear friend of mine protesting against one of these abortion clinics when I was in Montana with my dear friend John O'Neill. So that was a real privilege to me to do that for a few hours with him. I mean, people didn't vote. People didn't get out and vote. They just thought, oh, it's fine. Trump's in, everything's fine. They've got no idea. I mean, what was it? Against Ted Cruz, Hollywood spent $70 million to unseat him.
And that was going to fund the caravan, foreign invasion.
Absolutely. And that was all revealed by Project Veritas. But sorry, I'm talking.
Well, at least they wasted it. At least it wasn't successful.
No, well, it's still going on. Yeah, there's thousands of invaders every day.
Well, we better wrap up. We've been going about an hour. Who wants to pray out?
Your prayer was real strong before we started, Mark. If you could pray us out, I think that'll be good.
I'd be honored. Let's pray. Father, we just thank you for the privilege of having this conversation. We thank you for the privilege of being able to speak and the privilege for people to listen. And Lord, our countries are united. We're united in this fight between nationalism and globalism. And I bring the United States of America to you. I just ask that people will get this, that people will get on the battlefield. And if it is going to be Gideon's army, I pray that you will just reveal where they are so that we can join up with them and to encourage them. And I just ask that the church will really, really rise up within the United States of America and to push back. Father, give us the strength over here for those of us that are awake as well to find more and more. It is a seek and rescue mission to find out who is awake, who is part of the remnant body. Praying that for in regard to America and regard to over here, that we can find other members of the remnant body. And Father, just help us to have a listening ear to call us to what you are wanting us to do at this point. We are born for such a time as this. We are here at this moment, as Psalm 139 says, you know every single hair on our head because you put it there. So I just pray that people can realize the urgency of the hour, instead of having it's okay, we're all going to be raptured out of here, it doesn't matter, the whole thing can go to hell in a handcar. It does matter. It does matter, because we need people to come to you. We need people to repent of their sins and to ask to come to Jesus to be their Lord and Savior. And we need that. That is our role on both sides of the pond. It's the mandate that you have given us, and that responsibility. So I thank you for the privilege of having this outlet, and I ask that you will bless Brother Man and Brother Champion and their families and their extended families, and just pray that you will protect America, pray for the protection of President Trump and Melania and Vice President Pence. And I just pray that the deep state will be thrown out within his administration, that you will throw these people out, and that you will bring people to justice that need to be brought to justice, we pray. Commit all this to you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Jesus' name.
Amen. Well, thank you, Mark, and God bless you. And everybody, thanks for watching. You can go to Prophecy Brothers /Brexit to see this show. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'm going to have some show notes on there. I'll link to the other show that we did with Mark Pryor. And then I'll probably put a link in for a couple other shows that we did. We brought up G. Edward Griffin. He was on the Prophecy Brothers before, and Debbie Bacigalupi was on the Prophecy Brothers. So I'm going to link both of those. And then if you want to learn more about the Constitution, more about American history, more about liberty principles, there's going to be a link for the Liberty Classroom there. I ask, and well, I'm doing a long commercial here, but if you watch us this far, please subscribe to our channel, like the video, and share it with your friends so we can get this message out.
And Mark probably has, you have websites that you want to point people to?
Yeah, what's your website again?
Yeah, go to www.creativehubproductions.limited.com. Between Lambs and Lions is on YouTube. Please keep viewing that. There's going to be a new short film, The Iris Echo, which is a 22-minute drama about communism. I'll let you know, guys, when that come out. You can find me as Mark Sutherland on Facebook. You can also find me on Facebook with across the pond and all the rest. And when I get Twitter sorted and all the rest, I will let you know.
All right, great. Amen.
All right.
Thanks, Mark.
Right.
Thanks, everybody,
Thank
for
you.
watching.
Absolute privilege. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
That was a lot of powerful information. So everybody watch this 5 times in a row, and I think everybody will learn something.
All right. All right, thanks for watching. We'll see you the next time on the Prophecy Brothers.
There we go.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel.